Hey everybody, welcome to Earth Science, and it's time for a new unit. We finished up weather, and now what we got to do, what we want to ask ourselves is, okay, with all that weather, we did like water cycle stuff. We thought about water evaporating, forming clouds, and then falling back down as rain, but then we stopped, right? What happens once precipitation hits the ground is going to be the question that we're asking in this unit. The big theme is going to be basically how does that weather interact with Earth's surface? So I've got some like various pictures here. These are pictures up in the Adirondacks. Um, I believe this is Basin Mountain in the Adirondacks. So let's think about this. As all of this weather stuff happens with clouds, as it falls down and hits Earth's surface, it doesn't always make the landscapes look exactly the same. And that's what we're going to be getting into is like, how does it interact with the rock? How do we get weathering and erosion and deposition of those sediments? How do we get different landscapes? And how do these sediments like behave in running water? All right, so New York's a pretty cool state in terms of its varied landscapes. Mountain ranges. I think these two pictures, and yeah, this is right. This one is from Saddleback looking over at Basin Mountain. This one is from Basin looking back over at Saddleback Mountain. So we've got really impressive mountains, the Adirondacks, a couple others downstate, Taconics, things like that. We've got plateaus. If you head to basically south of the Thruway, it's all plateau. This is if you've ever skied Labrador Mountain. It's Labrador Mountain comes down the side of this valley right here. This is a plateau that's been eaten away by a glacier that came in and out of this valley. Um, so these like high flat areas, and again, Labrador Mountain's down that one. If you go that way a bit, that way a bit, it's Toggenburg's over there, and that way a bit, Song is over there. They all kind of work down these glacial valleys in the plateaus. They're not really mountains, as we'll learn soon. These plateaus can because the like elevation is higher and the water is going to fall more. You get really deep ravines. These are down towards the Finger Lakes. Some of the state parks down there have really nice big gorges. Um, I had other pictures of like Tug Hill. You guys are probably more familiar with the Tug Hill than. Uh, uh, yeah, so deep gorges up there in the Tug Hill again because that's so high in elevation that when water hits it or snow melts, that water has a lot of potential to dig these deep, narrow valleys called gorges. All right. Lastly, we've got plains. This is from just south of Syracuse over towards maybe Fabius. Looking up over Syracuse and some of the drumlins you can see there on the south edge of Syracuse. That's those kind of lumpy hills there. But then from Syracuse up towards Lake Ontario or up towards Pulaski is pretty darn flat. So that's more like one big plain. So we've got plains, we've got plateaus, we've got mountains. It's a varied state to live in. We've got a lot of different landscapes. And that's where we're going. So surprise, surprise, we've got some reference tables to learn. All right, so pages 2 and 3 of the reference tables. What I'll probably do, what I will have already done by the time you watch this video, I'll separate out pages 2 and 3. I'll do a PDF of just these two pages. And we've got to learn to use these, and that'll be great. You guys will nail it, okay? Um, so page 2, always look at the titles because there's going to be times where you're looking for landscape regions. And the next couple activities I have you do, I might say, what landscape region, blah, 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 right? That's got to go off in your head that, oh, if I need a landscape region, I should be looking at page 2 and have answers that are things like the Allegheny Plateau, the Erie, Ontario lowlands, and so on. All right, so roughly, what are these things? You folks live here. You know what I'm going to do real quick? I'm going to open this in Cami. So let's pause and do it in Cami. I'll be right back. All right, we're back. And I did it. So this is what you're going to get, pages 2 and 3 of the reference table. Then you don't have to deal with the rest, and it's already rotated for you. Everything's good to go. Let's talk about some of those things I was just mentioning, some of those areas. You folks live in Pulaski, which is right between the lake and the Tug Hill Plateau, right about there, which gives us some of that unique weather stuff that we just studied with lake effect snow and all of that. But now, again, we're thinking about not just weather, but how does the weather and the bedrock interact to determine what our landscape looks like. And hint, hint, we'll be looking at bedrock in just a minute. So we live basically on a plain. When I said, here's that shot of Syracuse, I was right on the edge. I was just south of Syracuse, looking up this way at those plains. So totally flat, all of that. Saddleback and Basin are high peaks. Those are way up here in the mountains, way up here. Tug Hill Plateau, which again, we're familiar with some of those gorges. I think those are over here. Yeah, they were over here at that state park that's over there. What is it called? I don't remember. Whetstone Gulf State Park. I had to look it up. It was going to drive me nuts, which is great. You guys should definitely check it out when you have the chance to. Right over here on this side of the Tug Hill, and you'll see some of those deep gorges. They're unbelievable. It's really cool. So yeah, some of the landscapes maybe we're not quite as familiar with because we don't, not everybody travels downstate, but we've got the Hudson Mohawk lowlands. So the Mohawk River flows from Rome pretty much right down through here. The Hudson starts up here in the mountains and comes down through this valley right here, and then cuts through some of this other stuff to get out right by right next to New York City, next to Manhattan. The Taconic Mountains are really part of a mountain range that will take up a lot of this space over here. Out of state, we're not going to worry about it. The Allegheny Plateau, you can really consider it an extension of the Appalachians, but there's your plateau, your higher area here. And again, we've talked about this before. If you drive from Pulaski down towards Syracuse, as soon as you get south of Syracuse, you're in hills that are hundreds and hundreds of feet high. In fact, again, that's where we said all those ski areas are: Labrador, Song, Toggenburg. They're all coming down the sides of valleys in this plateau. There's not enough relief. There's not enough up and down in the plains where we live to give us any good downhill skiing. I know there's Dry Hill up here somewhere. I'm not really familiar with that. I've never been there. And you got Snow Ridge over here, which isn't as big, but gets an unbelievable amount of snow from that lake effect machine that we have here. What else? It'll get a little confusing when we do the lab down here where these dots are, but people figure it out. So don't panic. We'll get there. There's a Newark Basin. There's a Mesozoic era Triassic Basin right through here. We call it lowlands for some reason on this reference table. The dots versus the lines. If you cross the line, the one of these dark lines in a car, you're gonna notice it. So, like again, if you go from Pulaski down towards Syracuse, as soon as you pass Syracuse, you pass that line, and you'll see that you're in big hills. If you go from Pulaski just up towards the Tug Hill, you recognize it. As soon as you get past Richland, you start driving uphill pretty steep, and get into where you're at a higher elevation with deeper valleys. Crossing into the Adirondacks is like a no-brainer. You spot it right away, right? So those dark lines will represent distinct different landscapes that are very easy to spot. The dotted lines are more like, it's almost the same geologically, it's the same, but we have different names for them, like regionally. So the Allegheny Plateau and the Catskills really are the same thing. When you cross this dotted line, you wouldn't notice it. And in fact, we haven't learned this map yet, but when we start to learn this geology map, you'll notice that that line's not there. This pattern indicates that this is all the same rock. It's just that here and here we have different names for it. Which means the Catskills, if you've ever heard of those, people will say the Catskill Mountains. They're not, in a technical sense, in a geology sense, they're not mountains. They're part of this plateau. They're so significantly eroded that the valleys are so deep that if you're at the bottom of those valleys and you look up to what's left, you're going to say, whoa, those are mountains. Technically, structurally, geologically, they're not. They're just a very eroded plateau. Adirondacks structurally are mountains. So that's going to be some of the goals here, is to see, like, geology-wise, what makes up landscapes. So one of the questions you're going to face multiple times, I'll put it on this first practice, and it's definitely on the lab in a couple of spots, is what determines your landscape? So what kind of things make Pulaski out the window right now look the way it does? And why does it look different when we go somewhere else? It's really a combination of two things, if in a simple sense. It's the, I don't know, you guys don't have to write this in here, but it's the bedrock. So what bedrock underlies an area, and along with that bedrock, what kind of climate is interacting with it. So it's like what forces from the top and what forces from the bottom. You know what I mean? From the top would be the climate. What's the long-term patterns in the troposphere here? The long weather patterns um, that make an area the way it is, and how does that interact with the structural rock that's underneath us? And I'm not talking the soils. I'm talking dig down to where you get to actual rock. I mean, you see it at the Salmon River as that cuts through. You see bedrock. You see all those layers of bedrock, sedimentary rock. Um, the combination of the bedrock and the climate really determine what your landscape's like. So your job is going to be to play with these maps a little bit, and then we'll do a lab that will take it a step further. If you need landscape regions, you're going to come here. So your answers in those questions should be like words that are on here: Adirondack Mountains, Tug Hill Plateau, Erie, Ontario Lowlands, and so on. And again, dotted lines mean you're not necessarily changing, though that gets a little bit confusing. That little neck right there, you're not necessarily changing landscape type. It's more just like a different name. Down here, we'll get to what is the rock that underlies it. There's also cities here. This is a rule with the regions. I think I've mentioned before. If there's a regions question that has a city named in it, it has to be on this map. They can't ask you about cities that aren't on here. Pulaski is not on this map. So Pulaski won't be part of a regions question, other than sometimes there's a little paragraph that will say like, one of those reading assignments, and here's a reading and here's a map, and Pulaski does this. Then they can ask about that reading. But if it's just a question sitting on its own, they can't ask about Pulaski because people that live in other parts of the state might not know where we are. For example, if I ask you about Riverhead, are you going to know where that is off the top of your head? A lot of people don't, and then it's kind of hiding in a weird font way down here. But it's there, so that's legally okay to have a regions question on that. So I'm going to have a thing where you're going to have some cities. Just find the city, no big deal there, right? Some landscape regions. So if I said Ithaca is in what landscape region, what you do is you say, okay, there's Ithaca. Then you come up to this map. You say, oh, that's in the Allegheny Plateau. Not too bad, eh? The two maps match like pretty well. You can see the features all kind of follow the same thing. I mean, the Tug Hill is kind of missing from that because of how that formed, but most of the other features stand out pretty well. In fact, you can see this little Newark lowlands, this basin right here, right here. What else might I ask? I might want to know what kind of rocks are there. So we got a couple of things to learn there. I might also want to know how old they are. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom a little bit. Come on down here. First, match the pattern. That's no big deal, right? So you got this kind of dot pattern. There's your kind of dot pattern. And then we're going to have a couple of different things that it will tell us. One is these crazy words that are in uppercase letters. And if you see uppercase letters, those are ages. That's how old the rock is. And it's okay to use a word for that. If you say Devonian in age, a geologist is going to know what you're talking about, or they carry around a little pocket scale like this, or they have their earth science reference tables. They can get numbers off that. We're not going there yet. All we're going to say is if you can say the age of the rock is Devonian, I'm happy. So again, what's the problem going to be? Ithaca is in what landscape region? It is in the Allegheny Plateau. And the rock is how old? You can use the word Devonian for that answer. That's okay. That's great. In fact, it's more than okay. It's the correct answer. So anything in uppercase here are ages. These are all ages. And New York State hooked us up here. They did one thing that's very nice. I'm not sure how soon this will come up, but it will eventually. They put this in order from oldest rock. I learned to type one day. Oldest rock here up to youngest up here. So in terms of Earth's history, the oldest rock are these you find up in the Adirondacks. That rock is quite old. And the youngest should be Long Island. Yep. This is underneath my head here. There's that right there. Okay. Last thing that I could ask are the rock types. So you got two things here. First off, if it's lowercase, It's the rocks. So things like limestone, shale, sandstones, and conglomerates. Now this is like a weird assignment because you're going to be putting down correct answers that are words that might be unfamiliar and you don't know what they mean. And that's all okay for right now. We're going to keep on unwrapping that as we go through the year, and you'll figure it out. But let's go through this Ithaca problem again. Ithaca is in what landscape region? It is in the Allegheny Plateau. The rock is how old? It is Devonian. And what rocks might you find? For bedrock, limestone, shales, sandstones, and conglomerates. That's great. You're pretty much there. The only other thing I might pop in there, if I can move my head out of the way here, is whether those rocks and all this is just what category are they in? Are they sedimentary? These rocks are all sedimentary, or are they metamorphic or metamorphosed, which means changed. They were other rocks and they changed. So basically, all of these from this line down are all metamorphic, and up here are all sedimentary. Just follow that. And again, maybe those words you don't exactly know what they are yet, and that's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. We're going to figure it out. But our job for right now is just to start to use these maps together, learn to pop back and forth between them, learn roughly what the landscapes are like, and start to see what kinds of rocks we find in them. And from there, we'll do more and more and more to continue to figure out this wonderful, varied landscape that we get here in New York. Other states aren't as varied, aren't as interesting. We're lucky here. All right, so with that in mind, got a classwork you'll try, and once we're done with that, in the next day or two, we'll move into a lab on landscape regions. Hope you're doing okay. Welcome to Marking Period 3. We'll wish you luck. Take care.